Hello, this is Jalal. Today I want to be talking about the 5 Platonic solids plus the other 2 solids that I think are very important, and their correlation to spiritual alchemy and crystal work. Alright, first we have here is a grid that I've drawn. If I take all these crystals off here, you can see what this grid is. I call it the Sacred 7 because this has all of the 5 Platonic solids plus the sphere and the star tetrahedron. Alright, if you check out each one, I'm going to start with the star tetrahedron. The star tetrahedron represents light, and it's basically just 2 tetrahedrons overlapping each other. This is probably one of the newer of the solids that has just been discovered or rediscovered and is used in metaphysical work now. The next one I want to talk about is the tetrahedron. This one represents fire. This one is your standard tetrahedron. It's just like basically a 3D triangle. It's this little guy. Next I want to talk about is the Earth hexahedron, or the cube. This guy. And this solid represents Earth. The next one I'm going to talk about is the octahedron, which is air. And yes, this represents gases or air. The next one is the water, which is the icosahedron. This one. This represents water. And next one is the dodecahedron, which represents prana or ether. These are all of these solids from here, the 5 originals, these are Plato's solids. These are the Platonic solids. And all 5 of them were considered sacred many years ago in the Greek mystery schools. And these are basically the elements. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot about one last one. The sphere is the void. Okay, but these solids are basically a representation of the alchemic materials of the universe. You can basically sum up any basic material that's in the universe in any of these 7 solids. I call them the Sacred 7. Other people just say there's 6, some people say there's 5, but from what I've gathered, I would like to say that there's 7. There's probably a few more that you could throw in there, but I think 7 is probably the most appropriate that you can use with these. So this one up here, this is a star tetrahedron. This little guy is made out of clear or a little bit of cloudy quartz. It's like a clear quartz, but it has some white inclusions in there. If you notice, though, the star tetrahedron is really interesting because at one level it's a cube that has been just shaven away on the edges, and it fits perfectly into the cube if you ever make one. Then if you turn it around a little, you notice it's 2 tetrahedrons. This is a really interesting solid because it's kind of more than one solid thrown in one solid. And the next one is just the little tetrahedron, which is fire. If you notice, the inside of the tetrahedron forms the perfect 6 directions. If you look inside of it, you see how it makes that perfect 6 directional symmetry in there. Then there's the cube, and these ones are smoky quartz. All these little guys, except the star tetrahedron, which represents light. This one is white quartz or clear quartz. Then there's the octahedron. This is like what the basis of the pyramids in Egypt. It's like half of an octahedron are used with. This is that's the solid that they used, was the octahedron. The next one is the icosahedron, which is the water, but this one has 20 sides. And this one's also smoky quartz. Then I have the dodecahedron, a smoky quartz version of it. And this represents ether. This one has 12 sides. It's more of it's what represents prana or ether that runs through the universe, which most scientists still have trouble even understanding that ether is everywhere in the universe, but that is one of the most important of the solids because it's everywhere. And the last of the little guys is the void, which is the sphere. With all 7 of them, you get a basic arrangement of the entire universe. Everything in the universe can be divided in any of these 7 solids. Light, for instance, would be the star tetrahedron. Fire, earth, air, water, ether, and the void. Now, for you who don't know what the void is, the void would be considered it'd be like a dimensional gate. It's going through one dimension into the next dimension. It's anywhere there's space between dimensions is the void. And that's what the sphere represents. And in all honesty, most objects in the universe naturally adhere to this shape, which is the sphere. In the third dimension, anyway. That's just one of the main shapes of the entire universe. So I thought it's very important to include that one in the Sacred Seven. But anyway, I did the little diagram just to show you how they all fit into the perfect, the 7 circles. The 7 circles make the perfect, it's sacred geometry, and they all fit into there perfectly. That's why, to me, I really consider the Sacred Seven one of the most important structures in spiritual alchemy, or trying to understand the elements and understanding their relation to the universe. Well, that's going to be it for this little section. I'll see you next time. This is Jel-El. I'll see you later.
Here we go again, talking about another very important and interesting aspect of sacred geometry, concentric circles. So one of the truly wonderful things about sacred geometry is that you can actually see it all around you. When you have the eyes, when you can see, you can see. And when you can see, it's all around us, in us, through us, everywhere, at work. Here we go again, talking about another very important and interesting aspect of sacred geometry, concentric circles. So one of the truly wonderful things about sacred geometry is that you can actually see it all around you. When you have the eyes, when you can see, you can see. And when you can see, it's all around us, in us, through us, everywhere, at work, omnipresent, omnipotent. It's a very, very beautiful thing. You want to see a clear manifestation of sacred geometric principle called concentric circles? Toss a rock up in the air and let it fall into a pond. Kadoosh! Concentric circles. Very beautiful. There are numerous examples of concentric circles in nature. Tree rings are a perfect example. Tree rings are like a slow motion version of this waveform phenomena. Each ring marks the passage of an entire year. Another trip around the sun, another ring, another trip around the sun, another ring. It's like a language, like the tree is talking to us, telling us its life history in these rings, like chapters of rings. And the rings of Saturn. Now there is a spectacular, monumental manifestation of concentric circles. And the solar system itself. All the planets falling around the sun in more or less concentric circles. Beautiful. So how does this natural possibility of concentric circles relate to this language called sacred geometry? It traces right back to nature's first pattern. If we count out one radius at a time from any of the centers of nature's first pattern, we find the possibility of concentric circles expanding all the way into infinity, all sharing the same center. The first circle out from the center in nature's first pattern is traditionally called the germ of life. The second circle is called the seed of life. The third circle is called the flower of life. And the fourth circle is called the fruit of life. As they expand, each of these four circles share specific qualities, and yet each holds ever more potent sacred geometric possibilities. The germ of life creates numerous graphic possibilities, including a six-pointed star, the hexagon, and equilateral triangles, two of which form the archetype known as the Star of David. It even brings forth the famous peace sign. The seed of life, the second concentric circle, holds all the possibilities of the first plus more, including the famous archetypal form known as the yin-yang, perfect symbol of duality in general, and specifically projective and receptive energy, also known as gender energy. The seed of life also holds the famous Kabbalistic graphic known as the Sephirotic Tree of Life, which is so multifaceted that it can be contemplated for lifetimes and has been. This brings us to the extremely important flower of life, the third concentric circle from our chosen center. Drunvalo Melchizedek is the being who is most responsible for bringing this form into the contemporary mainstream. Of course, it's always been an archetype of sacred geometry, but he actually brought it forward. I met Drunvalo around 1990 and became his immediate fraternal friend, as both of us had spent countless hours contemplating and meditating on sacred geometric archetypes. Drunvalo believed with all his heart that the flower of life, the third concentric circle, was the key form, the key archetype of sacred geometry, and then that was the thing that everybody should be studying in a primary way. On the other hand, I just as firmly believed that it was two circles of common radius and the Vesica Piscis, which was the root form. And that's where the real key study was. But he said to me very sincerely, he said, I understand why you would feel that way, Charles. I really do. But trust me, it's the flower of life. Well, I wasn't totally convinced, but on the other hand, I respected Drunvalo so much that I couldn't argue with him. But now, I'm seeing that we are both right at the same time. Because, in essence, each of these archetypes is a layered possibility of the same sequential geometric energy, and each, in its own way, points to the transcendental nature of this pattern, nature's first pattern. The original circles in nature's first pattern both naturally enlarge in size and naturally reduce in size, creating a never-ending circular and spiraling dance of contraction and expansion all the way into both macrocosmic and microcosmic infinity. The infinite matrix of two-dimensional sacred geometric possibilities is the root conceptual architecture of the universe. The fruit of life is a flat plane, a conceptual plane, and yet it hints at the third-dimensional plane. The archetype known as the Star of David. That is truly significant. As we expand our radius of comprehension into the fruit of life, we discover the famous graphic known as Metatron's cube, an illusion of the three-dimensional Platonic solids, the tetrahedron, the hexahedron, the octahedron, the dodecahedron, and the icosahedron are all to be found inside this one graphic form known as Metatron's cube. That's really mind-boggling. In fact, Metatron's cube is so significant that it deserves its own chapter, so that's coming up. Keep an eye out for that one. As these concentric circles continue to expand beyond the fruit of life, ever more complex possibilities evolve. I have created thousands of mandalas and graphics based on the archetypes of sacred geometry, both directly and indirectly connected concentric circles. And these experiments have proven to me that this study is literally limitless. I know by direct experience, when we concentrate our visual attention on the perfect, omnipresent, omnipotent principles of the universe known as sacred geometry, we set ourselves up for the ultimate possibility of human experience. Profoundly personal, spiritual intimacy with unity consciousness. The all. It's very obvious there's really a lot of fascinating mathematical possibilities, scientific possibilities within this thing called sacred geometry. But that's not what I'm primarily interested in. I make mandalas to get closer to Spirit and to allow Spirit to guide me and teach me through this language. That's what I do.
I had my first glimpse of that other universe, that which we call the conscious universe, but I prefer to call it the knowing universe, because it is the beginning and the end. It is the foundation of all power, our knowledge, and our life. I had been living in the knowing universe, but I was not aware of it.
Zero representing the beginning, and 9 representing completion. It is said that 0 represents the beginning of all, 3 representing the Holy Trinity, mind, body, and spirit, and as I've stated in the previous video, 6 representing the seed of life, or Genesis pattern of the flower of life, which all life springs from, and 9 representing completion. I highly suggest to Google it. The other shape I want you to know of, and definitely Google this one, is called the star tetrahedron. This is a perfect combination of 2 tetrahedrons phased within each other. One has the apex facing upward to the cosmos, and the other has the point facing down into the earth. This is also known as the Star of David. There may be a relation, I don't know. It is said that this shape represents the element of the spirit. Also, that the star tetrahedron represents the combination of the masculine and feminine consciousness. Some New Age philosophy believes that when we were beings in another dimension, there was no gender. That masculine and feminine were one, creating a perfect light being. It is their belief, and my belief, that being here in this third dimensional reality causes us to be separated, becoming masculine and feminine. Some believe that the star tetrahedron combines both the masculine and feminine together in one, helping us become one, and through a powerful meditation, aligning and opening of our chakras and opening our mind to source, taught by many but explained incredibly by Drunvalo Melchizedek, to create something known as the Merkaba, which is light spirit body, which allows us to become light beings and traverse the universe astrally and connect with the Akashic record consciously. Wow.
This was the tetrahedron was called fire. The cube was called earth. The octahedron was called air. The icosahedron was water, and the pentagonal dodecahedron was ether or prana, life force energy or chi. And these five, the combination of these five forms created a discipline called alchemy, where the understanding of the blending of fire, earth, air, water, and ether were what created everything and were the basis of creation itself. Another basis of creation itself is the DNA molecule. The DNA molecule is what contains the knowledge of, say, how your body is created. However, I believe that it's a little bit further along than that it actually contains the knowledge of how to create the entire universe. But it has at least that much of how to create your body. But all the physical forms, biological forms on the earth are all based on DNA. And that, the DNA molecule, is based only on these two forms. Now, there is a way, the original way was that they saw it as a cube that was rotating at 72-degree angles. That was one of the first ways. And then later, other scientists discovered that, okay, you could see it that way, but a better way is seeing it with these two forms here. These two forms are, in sacred geometry, are what are called duals of each other. They're duals because if you take the centers of the pentagonal dodecahedron and drew lines between them, you get this form. And the other way around, if you take the centers of this one, you get this form. They're duals of each other. In the same way that these two are duals of each other. If you connect the centers of a cube, you get an octahedron. And this one defines the parameters of this one. So these two are duals of each other, and these are duals of each other. This one here is found also in the cube, and in a way that I'll explain in just a moment. So this is your DNA, and what it is the DNA is just the icosahedron creates the dodeca, and then the dodeca creates the icosa again, which creates the dodeca again, which creates the opposite again, and it begins to turn, and it makes the two strands of the DNA. And a little detail that's interesting that they've discovered just recently in the last couple of years, you know, in all your biological books, you usually see a DNA molecule sort of coming from nowhere and going nowhere. They just sort of start and twist and stops and like it goes on forever. That's not true. They've thrown that out in the last couple of years, and it's been proven by other universities, though it's not in the textbooks yet, unless you got a brand new textbook. But the DNA molecule wraps back on itself and completes itself, and you can see how it does it because one end is this and one end is that, and they lock like a little lock, and they form a circle. And what it really is what's called a torus or a toroidal field. It's like a donut. It wraps back around. And the torus or the donut shape is the most unique shape in existence. It can do things that no other shape in existence can do. And it's the first shape that comes out of the flower of life. I didn't talk about all of that, but it is the most primal shape in existence. And so that's what these two things do, is create that. This is very interesting because this is water and that's prana. Water and life force energy is the pattern that creates the DNA. You could think about that for a few weeks. Just alone, at least I did. Okay. Now with that basic understanding, we're going to come back here again to Metatron's cube, where we started, where all those different shapes were. And there's one particular shape in here, which is the tetrahedron. But interesting is that when you get the tetrahedron, you don't get the tetrahedron by itself. You get two of them, and they're interlocked in this way. It's called a star tetrahedron. So if you were to take this line and keep that one, and keep this one, keep the ones that go into the middle, keep this one here that forms another triangle there, keep another one that comes down, forms another triangle there. There's a series of them. You'll see them in a minute. Erase all the rest of them. You get this. And at first glance, it doesn't look like anything. Definitely doesn't look like anything three-dimensional. But if you were to shade it in a certain kind of way, it becomes clear. And what that is called a star tetrahedron. And it's also inscribed inside of a sphere. This will fit perfectly inside of a sphere. Star tetrahedron inside of a sphere is one of the most primal shapes and important shapes that I could possibly give to you up here. It's more important even than the DNA. And I'm just going to follow down that one road. I mean, and every one of these shapes relative to sacred geometry, you could spend at least a week just going on and on and on about all the different ways that it goes into the reality on every single one of them. And we don't have that kind of time, so I'm only going to go just a little bit here. But now this blue one goes back out the other way, forming a three-dimensional pyramid going out the other way, out the back end. Okay, what is this? What does it mean? Well, one of the ways that the star tetrahedron inscribed in the sphere is important to life, one of them that we're going to talk about right now, is that it is the basis of all biological life forms. All of them, without exception. I don't care if you're on this planet or if you're in anywhere else, and you're some ET and you look really strange and weird, you still are going to go through the same things I'm about to talk about. Because there's only one God, there's only one sacred geometry, there's only one reality, and it's all the same no matter where you go. That's the purpose of why we're doing this, because we are interpreting the one reality from an instrument that is polarized, our brain. It's got a left and a right side, and it sees everything as either good or bad. And once the brain sees absolutely for certain that there is only one function, one thought moving through everything, it does this funny thing to the what's called corpus callosum that links the left and the right side together. It begins to open it up, and the two sides begin to balance, and enlightenment begins. Enlightenment means moving out of duality consciousness into unity consciousness, where you begin to see the unity of all life everywhere. You begin to realize that every one of us are linked in ways that the world right now has forgotten. And so, let's look at conception. Conception begins with a round sphere, the first one at the top of that pattern we showed before, the pure female energy of the round sphere called an ovum. We all began as a sphere, each one of us. Probably don't remember, but we did. And then through something called mitosis, we divided from one sphere into two. And this is an electron microscope photograph of the real thing, where we divided from 1 to 2. Then when we go from 2 to 4, using the binary sequence, it goes 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, which is one of the sequences of life. There's another really important one called the Fibonacci sequence, which we'll just lightly touch on later. It goes from 2 to 4, but when it goes to 4, it isn't just any 4, any old way. It isn't just 4 cells kind of floating around in a fluid. This is an actual photograph. Forget this one because it's beginning to go to the next level. But there's one here, one here, one here, and back here you can see the fourth one, same size. And if you drew a line between there and there and there, and then over to this one in the back, you get a tetrahedron. And it looks like this. The 4 cells are like that, and they're aligned down the north and south axis. There is a north pole and a south pole to the mitosis division of the ovum. And it forms this pattern right here. But then when it goes from 4 to 8, it forms another star tetrahedron facing this way. Like this. There's one linked in coming down here, and one linked
They were when they first came down into existence, and the egg of life pattern, north up, south down. Drunvalo further states that human beings do not grow like a string bean, getting longer and longer. We actually grow radially in 360 degrees from the original 8 cells. After the 8-cell division, it divides into 16 cells, whereupon it forms another cube or star tetrahedron on the end. This is the last time it will be symmetrical. When it divides into 32, 16 cells are in the middle and 16 on the outside. At the next division, there are 32 more cells. The cells start to lose their symmetry and start looking more like a blob. Drunvalo states that the blob has consciousness in it, but if you know anything about water as to how it is conscious already, then you know there was life and consciousness already existing from the first sphere, already existing in the ovum. Once it gets to this state, it becomes a perfect hollow sphere. Then the North Pole starts dropping through the space inside, going down toward the South Pole, and the South Pole comes up through the space to meet the North Pole. The hollow sphere then becomes a torus, a spherical torus. Every single known life form goes through this torus stage. This information in the torus shape is called the morula. After this, the expansion goes beyond the zona pellucida, and the cells begin to differentiate. The hollow space inside the torus becomes the lungs, the North Pole becomes the mouth, the South Pole becomes the anus, and all the internal organs form inside the tube that runs through the middle. Drunvalo theorizes that this might be why biblical tradition says that the tree of knowledge of good and evil is an apple tree. So you can see, we start out as a sphere, the ovum. We then move to a star tetrahedron at 4 cells, then on to 2 interlocked tetrahedrons at 8 cells. From 2 cubes at 16 cells, we turn back into a sphere beginning at 32 cells, and from the sphere we become a torus at 512 cells. All of these forms are sacred shapes that come out of the first informational system of the fruit of life, which is based on Metatron's cube.
In fact, Metatron's cube is so significant that it deserves its own chapter, so that's coming up. Keep an eye out for that one. As these concentric circles continue to expand beyond the fruit of life, ever more complex possibilities evolve. I have created thousands of mandalas and graphics based on the archetypes of sacred geometry, both directly and indirectly connected concentric circles. And these experiments have proven to me that this study is literally limitless. I know by direct experience, when we concentrate our visual attention on the perfect, omnipresent, omnipotent principles of the universe, known as sacred geometry, we set ourselves up for the ultimate possibility of human experience. Profoundly personal, spiritual intimacy with unity consciousness. The all. It's very obvious there's really a lot of fascinating mathematical possibilities, scientific possibilities within this thing called sacred geometry. But that's not what I'm primarily interested in. I make mandalas to get closer to Spirit and to allow Spirit to guide me and teach me through this language. That's what I do. And I have such profoundly beautiful and wonderful experiences that I just am forced to try to share this. It's that good, folks. It's better than sex. Well. A couple of months ago, I made this little video called Sacred Geometry Healing Animation number 11. And this painting was in the background, just begun, but people noticed it somehow, and that got me thinking. So now I'm making this piece based on the process of making mandalas, because people always ask me about that too. They ask me about software. What kind of software do you use to make your mandalas, Charles? And I use this software right up here. This is the software. And the hardware is, this is the hardware. It's a compass and a straight edge. A straight edge and a compass is all you need to make sacred geometric archetypes. It just unfolds all by itself. So I've been making mandalas based on the archetypes and icons of sacred geometry for over 25 years. And my first goal is always to make them beautiful. That's the major goal. But at the same time, they're also connected to empirical realities, to unchanging empirical realities of sacred geometry. So I'm dealing with intuitive, mystical, so-called right brain kinds of stuff, and I'm also dealing with crystalline perfections of the universe, unchanging principles of the universe. Left and right synergy is the goal. So now we're going to talk about this painting, which is called The Map of Time. And this is the way it looked in the video. And then this is the way it looked in successive stages of completion. this is the way it looks. It's somewhere over 300 hours. I don't know how many hours. I lost track. So why would I possibly want to put 300 hours or 400 or however many hours is in this thing? Why would I want to do that? That's the question we're going to answer. So when I make a mandala, it always starts with an idea that's been rolling around in my head for X number of days or years. So this mandala is really a meditation on time and our concepts of dividing it. Both the astrological chart and the face of our 12-hour clock are based on this sacred geometry. To be specific, it traces to the second consecutive circle of nature's first pattern, commonly known as the seed of life. The ever-expanding pattern of this mandala is created by two overlapping versions of nature's first pattern. The radius of the vertical version is set at 1 inch and the radius of the horizontal version is set at 1.73 inches, which is very close to the exact proportions of the Vesica Piscis height versus width. So as I was creating this complicated overlapping grid, I had to constantly check as I developed it outward. I had to constantly check to make sure it was lining up. And if I made a tiny error here, then it would get to be a big error over here. And that gave my left brain, so to speak, something to occupy its energies. And it was a repetitive energy because I had to keep solving the same problem over and over and over and over, like beads. It's like mantra. So this repetitive mental activity occupies my left brain and leaves my right brain free to gather any information that comes to me. These mandalas always start with a prayer. I ask the universe to teach me about this particular aspect of sacred geometry. And I know that I can be directed to an understanding through this meditative process and this revelatory possibilities of this kind of open-eyed meditation. And I find myself slipping further and further and further, deeper and deeper and deeper into my own inner world, so to speak. And sometimes, as a result, I find myself floating around on the ceiling, watching myself paint like somebody else was pushing the paint around. So of course I have to say something about color. That's the one area that I don't think about. I just feel that completely. It's completely intuitive. What I do is I mix a large palette of colors in small bottles for the specific painting, and then I blend those colors together on a palette as I'm working. And that's where the variation comes from. One of the really beautiful things that I see in this piece, I see in this relationship, is that we have a balancing kind of play between projective and receptive energies. Just like an astrological chart. Projective, receptive, projective, receptive, projective, receptive, all the way around, coming back and starting over again. And so we have this nature's first pattern in yellow going vertically, which is projective. And then we have another nature's first pattern going horizontally, the green one, which is receptive. So this center, conceptually, is everywhere and nowhere beyond time. And that center can move to any part in this grid and it will be the same center. And the same potentials will come out of that same center. And so when you're harmonizing with these kinds of ideas, and when you're actually experiencing something that does transcend time, it's very easy to step over yourself and to get a clear view of where you've been and where you're going. And time has a very strange way of flexing back and forth in the same moment. No matter where you go, there you are, in the same center, the center of the universe. So I think it's really interesting that I intuitively used this painting, the map of time, in that video which was dealing with a healing animation. Because this whole process that I use is very, very healing, and it's ritualized. And many people will say that no healing can happen unless there's ritual involved, some kind of ritual. And in my case, it's the ritual of creating mandala based on the archetypes of sacred geometry. It harmonizes me with these very transcendent universal principles which transcend time and space. They are quantum and they're potent. So how can you make mandalas? You could get a compass, straight edge, start drawing your own circles. You could also go to my website because there's free templates, free mandala templates on my website. You can download them, you can color them. That would be cool. You could also buy one of my prints. That would be real cool. I'd like that. I could eat.
One of the fundamental mysteries in philosophy is the squaring of the circle. You would have heard of that, possibly. And I'd give you a circle, and you're just allowed to use two tools, a ruler and a compass, to turn it into a square with the same area or circumference. We know it doesn't work. This is why we talk about the squaring of the circle is completely impossible. But in fact, there's more to it. One of the fundamental mysteries in philosophy is the squaring of the circle. You would have heard of that, possibly. And I'd give you a circle, and you're just allowed to use two tools, a ruler and a compass, to turn it into a square with the same area or circumference. We know it doesn't work. This is why we talk about the squaring of the circle is completely impossible. But in fact, there's more to it.
Remember, 100% of the visible universe is a Poincaré disk model. If you know what the hell a Poincaré disk model is, it's a model of projective geometry. 100% of the visible universe only exists and is visible because of magnetism. From the atomic scale, from the super micro to the super macro, the air in the balloon, if you will, of the atom, of the earth, of anything else is comprised only of one thing: force divergence, i.e. magnetism. So, from the micro to the macro, 100% of the visible universe, as far as the air in the balloon, if you will, that is magnetism.
The electrochemical records of the zero seed of all things are the zero elements, which are known as the inert gases, from which center of the fulcrum zero of polarity all polarizing body forms extend to manifest vitalizing life, and return as depolarizing forms to manifest devitalizing death.
Please explain briefly what you mean by the term extending the fulcrum. In my understanding, the fulcrum is the span that supports the seesaw. Do you mean by extension to make it higher, or do you mean to make the seesaw longer? I mean to make the extension, the fulcrum of the seesaw. The fulcrum is there in nature always. The moment you express a desire to do something, to make an action, then you extend from the fulcrum both ways. You extend from the fulcrum both ways. You make the seesaw. That's what it is to extend it, the amount of energy that you have. If you do not extend the fulcrum, you seemingly extend it. You seemingly divide its power. Because children on either end of the seesaw can express the power of motion. But that is all they do, express the power of motion. And that power of motion they express is the power borrowed from the stillness of the fulcrum at the center. I do not always have to like to say it's a seeming extension, because the universe is only seeming. Perhaps if I use the word, it's a thought extension. And it is. It's an imagined extension. In your thinking, you imagine. And you cannot imagine objectively without creating motion objectively in your imagining. And so it is in the thinking process of nature there seems to be an extension or division which takes power or borrows seeming power without borrowing it but seeming to. Before I say it, the extension of power is like a person pulling away from the fulcrum with an elastic band that stretches and strains and makes it harder and harder and harder to pull away from it. But on the opposite side, there's equal pulling away to balance that pulling. But the power is in the fulcrum, not in the... For if a man, for instance, if you stood out on the prairie and pulled at a rope, you have no difficulty pulling at that rope. It will not pull you back. But you hit the post there, and the post does not move. And you take an elastic band and you hitch it to it, and you stretch away from it. You find it pulling back. Therefore, you've created two conditions at the same time. You've created condition of extension and condition of expansion, and of retraction. That's the action and reaction nature. From the zero you have extended in every direction, because you cannot extend this direction from the fulcrum without extending in the opposite direction to balance it. The two conditions of decentration and concentration of mental thinking have been established in the two conditions of decentration and concentration of mental thinking have been established in what we call an electric current. If you let that elastic go, it will go back to where it started from and disappear in the fulcrum. That fulcrum is the zero. That which we borrowed from the fulcrum is a multiplication of that zero plus and minus. One balancing the other, one offsetting the other. You borrow 50 from there by your pulling, 50 plus. On the opposite side of that is a 50 minus. 50 minus and 50 plus total together a zero. Nothing in nature ever exceeds zero. It seems to. And so we have multiplying and divided universe into pairs of opposite conditions of compression and expansion, two opposite pressures which make it possible to run our engines and do all the things we have and run the engine of our heartbeat and so forth. But the fulcrum of every lever extension, every seesaw motion, the fulcrum never moves. That is its zero, and the elastic bands will pull together and disappear into the light from which it came, into the zero light from which it came, to divide itself into two lights that will illumine the bodies that have extended torment. Those lights illumine and warm and heat and cool the bodies that are extended from it to make a universe like that. To make a universe that fits the imaginings of your mind. When it retracts back to that, there's no more warmth to warm the bodies, no more light to light the bodies. The imagined universe disappears insofar as that one desire is concerned. Life has appeared and disappeared in death, and it will again reappear. The extension of the fulcrum and its multiplication to a point of equal potential to that which is borrowed from the fulcrum is right, with all of the effects that is created by so doing, the effects of warmth and heat and cool and growth and decay and moisture that make up this universe.
Knowledge is solely an attribute of the mind. Sensation is solely an attribute of the body. Mind is static light, the one and only power source of this universe. Thus thinking, you see what man calls life in a new light. You see it as the manner in which God manifests the idea of light and eternal life by dividing his one idea into countless pairs of many seemingly separate ideas. For that is what vibrating light waves are. These waves of light emerge from their fulcrum zeros and disappear into them in endless repetitions, forever and ever. The wave is an extension of heaven to earth and back again. The wave is a projection from the spiritual universe of rest to a resting point in the physical universe, and back again to the spiritual universe for renewal of power to repeat the journey. Another way of saying it is that the wave is an emergence from the static condition of rest through the dynamic condition of motion to the static condition and back again, or that it is an extension of cause through effect and back again through effect to cause. Between every pulsation of movement, there is a period of stillness, which divides every compression-expansion sequence. You can knowingly say that the power expressed in motion is not really in the motion, but is in the stillness which divides motion. If that is true, life itself, which is presumed to be motion, must have its source in eternal rest. If death is presumed to be non-motion, and life is dependent upon it to express life, the only possible conclusion is that life is two ways, both of which have their source in rest.
creates something known as the Merkaba, which is light spirit body, which allows us to become light beings and traverse the universe astrally and connect with the Akashic record consciously. Wow.
Now this is how energy is flowing into the nucleus. And look here. Here's your six-sided Merkaba. It's not exact, and this is probably because two different geometries are fighting with each other at that level. So this is the Merkaba shape, but you'll notice that it's got something interesting going on. The orbitals are not all the same width. Now this is how energy is flowing into the nucleus. And look here. Here's your six-sided Merkaba. It's not exact, and this is probably because two different geometries are fighting with each other at that level. So this is the Merkaba shape, but you'll notice that it's got something interesting going on. The orbitals are not all the same width.
Today we're going to talk about sacred geometry, the Fibonacci sequence, the flower of life, the Merkaba, energy, frequency, and how all of these things impact each and every one of us in our lives, in our daily lives. So today we're going to talk about the Vesica Pisces. It is just the very rudimentary, basic beginnings of what we are, what this place is, and what kind of say-so we have in this place. As you just looked at those three images I shared with you on the Vesica Pisces, I want to talk about the basics of how important that even just those beginnings are a wonderful way for us to start. We are all working on setting our intentions on our Merkaba and also getting our Merkaba activated, and I hope that everybody is working on that because now we know that we are able to do this ourselves. Let's talk a little more about the Vesica Pisces. The synchronicity of the universe is determined by certain mathematical constants, which express themselves in the form of patterns and cycles in nature. The outcome of this process can be seen throughout the natural world, as you just seen with those very basic symbols that actually resonate and radiate all the way through and through us and everything we see. I would call them the basic fingerprints. These days of mathematical and geometric constants are confirmation that certain proportions are woven into the very fabric of nature. Recognizing the significance of the simple fact offers us the means to understand how and why such matters were considered sacred.
It's only starting to click more and more over the last few months. I started asking myself a question. Why should the physical plane of existence be too different, too dissimilar to the astral planes? I realized when I think it was within the 3rd year of my out-of-body practice, I started getting really curious because of my conspiracy days, and I was thinking, I've always wanted to go and visit the Antarctic. It always seems, because of that treaty that's in place, where it's not being exploited for all of its resources, which apparently should exist, but nobody's exploiting it for oil or minerals. Why? Why is it that you can't just go there as a private citizen without the rigmarole that goes with it? And so I started getting really curious and having out-of-body experiences focused purely on Antarctica. And out of the times that I visited, it was probably upwards of around 10. Every single time I encountered non-human energy when I was out of body, so non-humans, ET, whatever you want to call it. And I started having very manipulative type experiences taking place every time I would visit Antarctica. And I would usually be sort of pushed away or traumatized in a way where it was building up, the energy was building more and more. I didn't really want to go back. I remember after the last experience, which was quite traumatic, and I was actually was being held in this room. It was, again, non-physical. It wasn't a physical room because I was out of my body, but it was very physical to my astral body. And I was being held in this room with these non-human entities which were quite unfriendly. And they could very easily at will enter my mind space, and the pictures and all the energy of it was of superiority. And it was unloving. There was a time just after that where spontaneously I was out of my body and suddenly I was on a trajectory to Antarctica, but I was on like an autopilot mode. It wasn't something I was trying to focus on. But it seemed like there was an energy behind me that was propelling me. And it actually got past what seemed these alien defenses, and I went further into the interior than before. And I crossed this boundary point where it was quite fuzzy, and I suddenly arrived into another parallel version of Earth. And I remember looking back at that experience recently because of some of the flat Earth stuff that I'm currently studying, and wondering, because of all the information surrounding this, which just does not gel, which does not sit straight with a lot of us. And looking back at that experience and those particular Antarctic experiences, and now having this new energy with my out-of-body practice where I want to know more. I want to have a lot more earthbound, real time zone experiences to start pushing past those boundaries. And some of that non-human energy, it can be very manipulative. But some of it can be the opposite. Some of it can be very loving, very friendly. And this was what gives me a lot of, inspiration these days for having these journeys, because it realizes we're not alone by any, shape or form, but that there are energies out there that love us very much, that look after us and guide us. And I'm not just talking about our guides or other, spirit beings, but there are non-human entities that are looking after us. And again, I'm sure this is nothing new to a majority of you in this room. When visiting the astral planes, when you don't hold as such a particular idea about that level of reality, your angle of perception can give you a very flat environment. And I think this is one reason why it was initially called, the astral planes, because your entry point can sometimes give you that perspective. And as you start to become more tuned into the environment without the expectation, you start to experience the astral cities, the other afterlife environments that exist there, but they're not always presented to you as some sort of astral globe environment. They're usually of quite a flat nature. And I started thinking again, why would the earth plane have to necessarily be so different? If this is a construct of a reality no different from those levels, if some of the artifacts that I experience on the astral planes don't seem to be too dissimilar from these levels. Sometimes when I've moved from within one astral environment, like for example, several times when I've moved upwards within an astral environment, up into the sky, and I've encountered some sort of almost like a force field. And as I start to change my vibrational frequency and move through the force field, I enter the ocean of another environment, of another frequency plane. And it's really fascinating. Then looking at this idea of the firmament that they talk about with the flat earth theory, and the idea that we're contained within this sort of dome, and on the other side of the dome is possibly water. And this is quite an ancient idea. This is not something that was developed over the last century by flat earthers. This is something that goes back quite a bit into our history. So it's this kind of stuff that now really fascinates me and is driving my current direction with out-of-body exploration, to not focus so much on those inner planes of reality, but to focus more here on what's going on around us here. 10 minutes, okay. The moon. I'm a curious soul. I had to go back. Now, several times I've aimed for the moon and completely overshot. And on one final occasion, and I haven't been back since, I was actually doing something completely different when I was out of body. I was with some children and I was showing them how to move around the planet. They were literally, most of them were unconscious from my perspective, semi-conscious in a sense from their perspective. If they would have remembered it when they returned to their bodies in the morning, it would have probably seemed like a dream. And I was showing them how to navigate around the earth. And this one child spoke up and he said, "Can we go into outer space?" And I was like, "Yes, we can!" And my energy just sort of propelled me like a rocket up and away from these children. And I completely shot the earth plane, and I was in another level of reality. And I was just thinking, I could just see the newspapers on the astral planes that morning. Astral teacher, earthbound teacher leaves his children in the upper atmosphere, unattended. And I was suddenly in this warehouse that was perhaps 4 times the volume of this space. And there was this illuminated version of the moon, which was occupying this space. And this man started walking out of the shadow, and he said to me, "This is the nearest we want you to come to the moon. This is a real-time model of your moon, but this is as close as we want you to get." And I had a lot of questions for him. There was recently, I came across a friend who shared some of his experiences, the moon, with me. And he said, "Todd, I've probably tried to go at least 20 times. And so far, every single time I ask, take me to the moon during an out-of-body experience, he's taken to a room where there's a photograph on the wall of the moon. Every single time." And it's made me wonder, why is it that there seems to be so much of a force stopping us, preventing us to actually experiencing the moon? It's something that I haven't been able to quite put my finger on. Even the data that I received on that particular occasion, which I don't have enough time to go through. I literally have 10 minutes left in total. Right, okay. That's all right. One of my absolute favorite out-of-body experiences happened years and years ago. And it was what really inspired me to take this journey to the depths that I've taken it to so far today. It was through a series of reoccurring out-of-body experiences where I was back in the same environment 4 times. The first time I arrived at this place, I was with a guide who instructed me that this environment was what's called a simulation environment. It's a simulation environment for those who are about to reincarnate back into a physical body on this level of reality. And that they go through a series of simulations, which is a simulation of the lifetime that they're about to incarnate into, the place of their birth, where they'll grow up, people they'll meet, and skills that they'll want to practice, skills that they're choosing at that point to take with them into that level of reality. And on the first time I arrived at this place, my guide introduced me to this woman. Her name was Deborah. And she was just about to go out onto this rowboat, out onto this lake, which was in this environment which is as physically real as Earth and looked like a physical Earth environment. Couldn't tell the difference. And as I was on this in this boat with her, I could feel this very strong connection. And I remember Deborah describing, her most recent life and the memory of it, and how she's very excited because she's traveling back, she's reincarnating back into the Earth plane on this adventure to team back up with her husband from that lifetime. And she was explaining how they were both murdered in that lifetime. And I said to her, I'm really sorry. And I thought, why am I saying sorry? She's quite happy and alive. But it was just like a knee-jerk reaction. And then suddenly, her appearance started to shift. And my guide had already said to me that this is probably going to happen when you're out on the boat with her, because she's going to regress in years. And he said to me, she's already attached to a baby in the womb of her upcoming mother. And she's still able to come and go from the womb as this adult consciousness to train in this environment before she reaches physical Earth. She knows where she's come from. She knows where she's going. And so as I was on the boat with her, her age started to regress, and she was like 6 years old. Beautiful, sort of mousy brown hair, crystal blue eyes. And again, I felt this really powerful connection with her. And she was explaining to me that one of her practices was going to be the equivalent of what we call clairvoyance on this level of reality. And I can remember returning from that experience and writing everything down, and I was really, it was so powerful to realize I was communicating with a soul that was right now attached to a baby, a body within a mother's womb on this level of reality. Within the period of months, I was able to get back out of body and revisit that environment a few more times, where I met up with Deborah again, and I was learning about her new life and the life that she came from. And on the fourth time going back, she was gone. And I called out for, where's Deborah? And one of my helpers came and said, Deborah is now reincarnated back into the physical. She's no longer here. And I was like, oh, that's so fascinating. But at the same time, I felt this connection was so strong. And I think my guide consensed. He says, would you like to go and meet her in her physical body, in her physical life? And I was like, yeah. So literally, we traveled back into the near-Earth plane from that environment. And I was now in a room on physical Earth. So I was in the near time zone, the real time zone, in my energy body, in my astral body, overlooking physical Earth, if you like, in this room, in this bedroom. And in this crib was this baby. And I started to communicate with the higher consciousness of this baby. And the higher consciousness aspect, which was Debbie, recognized me as like, it's good to see you again, Todd. And of course, the baby, the consciousness of the baby was completely different, but I was accessing another part. And when we made that connection, then this little boy walked into the room, and he was my 5-year-old son. And I looked at him and was like, what the hell's Luke doing here? And then suddenly it dawned on me that the little girl in the crib was my daughter, that was now, actually was born on this level of reality. And I was able to meet her before she incarnated back into a physical form. It was one of my most profound experiences to realize that when I look at other people now, even if it's a non-human entity, when I'm out of body and I initially might feel fear, or I might feel some sort of superiorness coming from me, I look to this experience and I realize and I make that connection that I may not know who this person is from this level, but I'm probably connected to them through one way or another, whether it's this lifetime, a parallel version of this lifetime. Multidimensional consciousness is extraordinary, and it's being repressed. You are living a double life. You're having out-of-body experiences unconsciously every single night. You're just not remembering them. You're probably barely remembering your dreams. There are different reasons for why we're not remembering these experiences and why we've been lied to. But ultimately, this is for us to start taking this power back. We're either spiraling down in fear from what we're focusing on, or we're spiraling upwards in love from what we're focusing on. In my heaviest conspiracy days, I was deep into fear. And I've learned that I can look at this stuff nowadays with love instead of looking at it just through fear. And it makes a powerful difference. It's no longer controlling me. I'm now in a position to where I can work with this energy, work with what's happening on this level of reality in a way which is actually transforming consciousness. And this is something we're all here to do, to be these agents of love and not just at the mercy of our fears. Do I have any time left, or is that it? 2 minutes. Anybody have one question? Sorry, shortest Q&A ever.
Yep, there's somebody here. Hold on.
Anybody? Hands up?
Yep, hold on.
Thank you so much.
Can you make, whatever you do, can you make it a question?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
The flat Earth, when you've been above Earth, when you've been in your astral body flying above, have you witnessed Antarctica circulating the Earth or down south?
Good question. In a lot of cases, you'll find that it really is dependent on the vibrational field you're experiencing. And this is what it confuses a lot of lucid dreamers and a lot of out-of-body explorers. When we move out of our bodies, it really depends on the level of reality that we're in at that time and what we're going to experience. The near-Earth frequency, if you're in the near-Earth frequency, the closest frequency to the physical Earth, you will experience it as a duplicate. And you will experience it in what I'm labeling the real time zone, which is somebody else's terminology. And therefore, you can then experience it for what physical Earth is. So if I was above the planet, I would experience it as the planet is. But I can also project. I can project unconsciously the idea, my expectation over that environment and see something completely different from the reality that is actually there. Mm-hmm. I've had experiences that show me one thing, and then another experience shows me something else. It's learning that, again, reality is dynamic. We can be experiencing a parallel version of Earth, which might have a completely different makeup, a completely different rule set. To answer your question in a better way than that, on occasion I have seen a globe. On occasion I've seen a disc. And again, that's based on my expectation. I have to get to a point to where I'm accessing the truth beyond my personal projection. My preferences, my expectations. When we can start to get to that level, that quality of experience, we can start to experience the truth of what is there. Mm. It's no different from us being on this level of reality and projecting our stuff onto other people. Our anger, you know, our judgments, our everything. You know, reality is there to be experienced beyond our projections. You know, we got this constant story going in our mind of what we think reality is, what we think we are, what we think other people are. And it's a matter of getting to a point where, again, we're in that energy of love where it's not that has to be this. We don't have to have an out-of-body experience to experience a parallel reality. We have it going on right here on physical Earth. We have a parallel reality which is based in fear, and we have a parallel reality based in love. Mm. And it really is dependent on what we're conscious of experiencing in that moment. But it's the best answer I can give you at the moment. I'm hoping maybe within the time that my first book is released later this year that I'll have some more definitive answers about this plane of reality. Take a card, stay in touch.
Ladies and gentlemen, Todd Akamesis.
Thank you.
Hi again. I told you these would be some deep videos, right? I hope I haven't disappointed you. I'm assuming that since you are watching this video, that you've seen my previous videos on energy, our connection to the universe and source, as well as the flower of life and Metatron's cube. This video is going to cover Metatron's cube and the basics on the Platonic solids based on the research that I've done. Who is Metatron? Well, of course, I must say, Google it. There are too many descriptions and interpretations for me to go over in one video. However, to summarize, many groups believe Metatron is an angel, that he was once human, named Enoch, the most high angel, which creates a bridge between heaven and earth, or the voice of God. I'm not discounting any of those beliefs. On the contrary, I completely believe that. However, I go a bit beyond that belief. I believe Metatron is what I like to call an ultra-terrestrial being. Ultra-terrestrial is a term I've given to beings that most people call angels, gods, deities, spirit gods, and so on. I believe in many different dimensions, vibrations, frequencies, and I believe ultra-terrestrials have the ability to traverse these at will to come in and out of our third dimensional plane by consciously changing the vibration and frequency of their physical and spiritual form, their energetic form. Much like how we change the channel on a TV, these beings have the same ability to do this with their entire form by manipulating the energy within themselves and within the universe around them. I believe Metatron to be one of those beings, and many others from our myths and legends who were created to help us evolve and act as a direct connection to Source, as well as our guides along the way. Why is it called Metatron's Cube? Again, Google it. My research and meditation have told me that it was named Metatron's Cube as it holds the answers to all life, and since Metatron is the hypothesized voice of God, I can only come to the conclusion that Source wants us to listen to what it's telling us, which I believe I have. It's within Metatron's Cube that we find the Platonic solids. What are the Platonic solids? Well, some research states that Plato discovered these shapes in Metatron's cube. Of course, other research shows that Pythagoras discovered them 200 years prior to that. We'll go ahead and let history argue about who done it first, shall we? Here is what I know based on my research. What defines a Platonic solid? A Platonic solid is a three-dimensional shape whose faces are all the same shape and whose corners are at the meeting place of the same number of polygons. Meaning, if the shape has three sides, it will touch three other shapes of the same dimension. If it has four sides, it will touch four other shapes of the same dimension, and so on. In science, if you look at all of the elements on the periodic table of elements, all known elements, and break all of them down to their base parts, you will see that every single one of them contains one or more of these Platonic solids within them. This means that everything in our known universe is made from these sacred geometric shapes. Now, it's said there are only 5 Platonic solids. I don't subscribe to that theory, as you'll see in a later video. It is known that the entire periodic table of elements contains these Platonic solids. Let's go into the 5 most well-known Platonic solids in this video. The first is the tetrahedron. A tetrahedron is a Platonic solid made from triangles. You can see that this shape is made from a total of 4 triangles, all connected to each other. You can see that there are 3 sides to each triangle, and they connect to 3 triangles of the same size and shape. The purest definition of a Platonic solid, as we know it. In New Age philosophy, the tetrahedron represents the fire element, and should you follow chakra teachings, is linked to the solar plexus, which is the center for personal power, acceptance, and a natural balance between the physical and the spiritual. I am going to be going over chakras in a future video that's not part of this series. The tetrahedron is the perfect symbol for balance and stability. It's also known as the Holy Trinity. Now, in math and the power of 9, which I'm going to cover in the next video, this is 4 triangles connected to equal the following dimensions. Pretty amazing. The next Platonic solid is the hexahedron, otherwise called a cube. It is a Platonic solid made from squares. This particular solid is made from a total of 6 squares, and you can see that each of the sides connects to a square of the equal dimensions. The cube, or hexahedron, is one of the most popular solids in the world. In New Age philosophy, the hexahedron represents the earth element and is linked to the root chakra. Meditating on this shape will assist in grounding your energy, regaining your focus, removing tensions, and easing physical stresses. It will reconnect your energies to that of the earth. Now, in math and the power of 9, this is 6 squares connected to equal the following dimensions. The next one we're going to discuss is an octahedron. An octahedron is a Platonic solid whose sides consist of 8 triangles connected together. In New Age philosophy, the octahedron represents the element of air, linked to the heart chakra, which is the center for love and compassion. This center includes the healing and nurturing aspects within. In Math and the Power of 9, this consists of 8 triangles connected to equal the following dimensions. Another Platonic solid is the dodecahedron, which is a Platonic solid that has pentagons for its sides. This solid has a total of 12 pentagons. In New Age philosophy, the dodecahedron represents the element of the ether and is of the universe, divine creation. And this is connected with the higher chakras, the third eye, the crown, which hold the energies of meditation, higher consciousness, and spiritual ascension. In Math and the Power of 9, this consists of 12 pentagons connected to equal the following dimensions. Now, a pentagon has 5 sides, and each corner is at 108 degrees. The last of the 5 best-known Platonic solids is the icosahedron, a Platonic solid made of 20 identical triangles. In New Age philosophy, the icosahedron represents the element of water and is linked to the sacral chakra. Water is all about movement, flow, and change. It moves easily from a gas to a liquid to a solid. It can be visible 1 minute and invisible the next. Now, in Math and the Power of 9, this consists of 20 triangles connected to equal the following dimensions. Pretty amazing math. Now, there are 2 other shapes that I want you to be aware of also in this video. I believe it's vitally important you know about them to know where I'm going with all of the information that I'm talking about in this series of videos. The first is the sphere. In many forms of New Age philosophy, the sphere represents the first awareness of Source, the beginning. It also represents to some what's known as the void, and to some all. So it is essentially the beginning and end of everything at once. Beginning and end of everything at once. This could very well be the connection of all that is. The first manifestation of being in this third dimensional universe. It is said that it was from this first geometric shape that all sprang from, the first sphere in the flower of life. In Math, and keeping of course with the Power of 9, which I'm going to go over in the next video, this is one sphere, perfect in all directions, height, width, depth, and dimension. The first object with any dimension in the universe. 360 degrees equals 3 plus 6 plus 0 equals 9. 0 representing the beginning, and 9 representing completion. It is said that 0 represents the beginning of all. 3 representing the Holy Trinity, mind, body, and spirit. And as I've stated in the previous video, 6 representing the seed of life, or Genesis pattern of the flower of life, which all life springs from, and 9 representing completion. I highly suggest to Google it. The other shape I want you to know of, and definitely Google this one, is called the star tetrahedron. This is a perfect combination of 2 tetrahedrons phased within each other. One has the apex facing upward to the cosmos, and the other has the point facing down into the earth. This is also known as the Star of David. There may be a relation, I don't know. It is said that this shape represents the element of the spirit. Also, that the star tetrahedron represents the combination of the masculine and feminine consciousness. Some New Age philosophy believes that when we were beings in another dimension, there was no gender. That masculine and feminine were one, creating a perfect light being. It is their belief and my belief that being here in this third dimensional reality causes us to be separated, becoming masculine and feminine. Some believe that the star tetrahedron combines both the masculine and feminine together in one, helping us become one, and through a powerful meditation, aligning and opening of our chakras and opening our mind to source, taught by many but explained incredibly by Drunvalo Melchizedek, to create something known as the Merkaba, which is light spirit body, which allows us to become light beings and traverse the universe astrally and connect with the Akashic record consciously. Wow. Now, of course, in math, and keeping with the power of 9, these are two tetrahedrons phased within each other. Remember, masculine and feminine, to equal these dimensions. Now, I want you to keep in mind that every single hedron that we've gone over here has not just one, but two things in common. All of them, which basically means everything in creation, contains the digital root of 9, meaning completion. However, all of them as well, from what you've seen and heard, contain the number 0, which means that every one of these Platonic solids and shapes also represent the beginning of everything as well. Food for thought. Now in the next video, I'm going to explain some of the awesome things and occurrences I've found in our universe and right here on Earth about the power of 9, to help bring us closer to the reason for these videos and to finally bring to light on why I made them. I hope you join me, and while you're here, please don't forget to check out my Facebook page, Mankind's Evolution Through a True Reawakening of Nature, or Metatron for short.
When man is fully aware of the fact that he eternally lives in the Creator's invisible magnetic light as one with it, and merely manifests life by action in the electric universe, he will then know that when action ceases, it merely ceases without affecting him, even as sound ceases without affecting him who made the sound.
Okay, principle number 1 is to recognize that learning is biological, like weightlifting. When we weightlift, our muscles grow. Similarly, when we're learning, the nerve cells in our brains are growing. This photograph shows a brain cell called a neuron. What I want you to notice is the cell body right here, this tail, which is called an axon, these branching structures called dendrites. When we learn, these dendrites grow and connect with other neurons. This cartoon shows a neuron at the start of learning. After a great deal of learning, the dendrites look like this. Notice how they've branched out and connected. From a biological standpoint, learning means neurons have grown and connected. The growth of brain cells is called neuroplasticity. Our brains literally remodel or remake themselves based on our experiences. So, how can I use the idea of neuroplasticity to help me learn? The first idea is repetition. If I'm going to learn something on the guitar, I need to repeat the pattern over and over so my neurons grow and connect. When a song is easy to play, this means I have formed the neural connections. Repetition also applies to cognitive learning, like dynamics. If I'm learning abstract concepts like rigid body, angular velocity, and relative motion, I need to practice using these ideas over and over. This is kind of like learning a foreign language. Similarly, if I'm learning an equation like V is equal to R cross omega, repetition will help me make this equation seem like second nature. The second way I can use neuroplasticity to help me learn is to practice correct fundamentals. If I'm learning guitar, I slow way down and work on a tiny bit of music, perhaps a measure or two. I try to play this music perfectly so that I'm encoding correct technique into my neurons. Using correct fundamentals also applies to dynamics. When I'm learning a subject like dynamics, I slow down and I'm making sure I'm applying my concepts correctly every time so that I'm building correct knowledge. In summary, neuroplasticity is the idea that the brain remodels itself based on experiences. There are 3 ideas that help me learn. First, repetition is the mother of all learning. Second, I always pay attention to correct fundamentals because whatever I practice becomes permanent, so I want to practice the right things. Third, I spend time learning in authentic environments. For example, when learning guitar, it's sometimes useful to practice playing with a band. For example, when learning dynamics, it is sometimes useful to practice applying ideas to real systems like the gear train in an automobile or the gear train in a bicycle.